The next line of the prayer of St. Francis is translated, "Where there is injury, pardon." Remember, the original prayer was written in French, and a more literal translation would be, "Where there is offense, let me put pardon." I suppose injury works here too, because both injury and offense bring pain. And sometimes there is anger and resentment, and sometimes there is even the desire for revenge. We've seen a rise in the taking of revenge in the last several years. Sometimes it is with the violence of words and insults. Sometimes it is by isolating and excluding the alleged offender, and sometimes it is with physical violence. We see it in leaders who are too emotionally immature to resolve matters in a peaceful, thoughtful, and gracious way. And we see it in others who are emboldened by leaders to make violence of every kind the means to dominate, punish, and destroy their adversary. Followers of Jesus Christ are called to be the exception. One of the teachings of Jesus that was the most offensive to the religious leaders of the day, and perhaps to many of Jesus' listeners, was his teaching on forgiveness. Once, when Jesus was in Capernaum, some people brought a person who was paralyzed. These friends couldn't get in through the front door, and so they made a hole in the roof and lowered the person down. The gospel writer Mark writes that when Jesus saw their faith, he looked at the young man and said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Well, this sent the religious leaders into a tizzy. Who can forgive sins except God alone, they asked. And they nearly accused Jesus of blasphemy right to his face. Another time, the Apostle Peter wanted to look impressive, so he asked Jesus, how many times should he forgive a person who sinned against him? Peter even offered a number. How about 7? Which was more than twice what the Pharisees taught. Peter thought that he was being very generous with his forgiveness, but he wasn't even close. 7 times 70 times, Jesus replied. I can imagine Peter's jaw drop as he slunk away. Forgiveness is a tough subject. It's one thing to forgive the person who cut in line in front of you. It's a way different thing to forgive the person who may have done some violence to you or someone you loved. Perhaps the most honest thing we can say about some deep and profound offenses is, I am forgiving you. Forgiving our offender doesn't necessarily wipe away the offense. What it does do is liberate us from the tyranny of revenge. It frees us from the power of hate and anger and bitterness. Then there is, of course, the matter of forgiving ourselves. Again, forgiving ourselves is a tough subject. First, there is the difference between forgiving ourselves for the accidental mistake, and then there is forgiving ourselves for lying to our spouse, say, or for some other grievous offense between us and someone we love or a close friend. Then there is the question of, do I forgive myself real easily? Or how much do I punish myself for this crime? Forgiveness removes the power of the offense to define our lives and our identity. Forgiving ourselves also frees us to make atonement for the offense in healthy and healing ways. It allows us to take responsibility for the offense and for the atonement without defining our lives or our identity. In a society that seems to increasingly value dominance and drools over the thought of revenge and eschews humility as weakness, be the exception. Where there is the pain of offense, where there is the pain of injury to a relationship, replace it with forgiveness. It doesn't take strength to take revenge. It takes strength to forgive.